I never should have opened the link. At first, it looked like nothing, just another anonymous drop buried in a corner of the net where conspiracy theorists shouted into the void. I'd seen plenty of those before, grainy photos, half-baked theories, digital ghosts chasing shadows. But this one was different. The message was short, almost desperate, as if whoever sent it didn't have time to waste. Asterisk humanity must know the truth. Spread this before they silence us. Asterisk no signature. No handle. Just that line, and an attachment that burned with encryption so heavy it nearly fried my rig. Curiosity is a dangerous thing. Still, I cracked it open. What poured onto my screen wasn't some poorly rendered hoax, it was footage, raw and undeniable. Satellite feeds capturing the endless dark near Jupiter's shadow, where something massive moved. Ships. Not ours. Their designs were alien, brutal angles, gleaming hulls, shifting patterns of light across armor that bent physics in ways I couldn't explain. They weren't broadcasting. They weren't signaling. They were simply waiting. Then came audio. Voices, clipped and urgent, pulled from encrypted channels I shouldn't have had access to. Government channels. My own leaders whispering about containment, silence, about keeping the public docile. One phrase kept echoing through the comms, cold and precise. Asterisk they are already here. Maintain the protocol. Asterisk. I wanted to believe it was some elaborate simulation, propaganda designed to stir fear. But the final piece shattered that illusion. A live feed, time-stamped only hours earlier, showing a human reconnaissance craft drifting powerless, its pilot screaming through static before a surge of alien light consumed him whole. My hands shook. This wasn't theory anymore. This was invasion. And worst of all, someone, somewhere in power, had known the truth for years. I thought I was being clever, careful even. I ran the file through offline drives, used burners, wiped my traces with layers of dead-end roots. For a few hours, I convinced myself I was safe, that I'd beaten whatever surveillance web had been cast over the leak. But when the pounding came on my door, it was like thunder splitting the walls. Heavy, deliberate blows, each one rattling the frame. They weren't police. Police knocked differently. These men didn't announce themselves, didn't call my name, didn't flash warrants. When I looked through the tiny gap in the blinds, I saw them, black-clad figures with no insignia, no badges, no identifying marks. They moved in sync, efficient, too disciplined to be mercenaries but too secretive to belong to any official branch of government I knew. Their faces were hidden behind visors that reflected the dim light of my apartment like blank mirrors. I didn't wait to find out who they were. My instincts screamed louder than reason. I grabbed the hard drive, slung my jacket on, and slipped out the back just as the door behind me cracked with a force that sent splinters into the air. I heard the sound of boots, calm, unhurried, like predators closing in on prey. Later, I'd learned they called it the *** silence protocol ***. It wasn't an official name, nothing about it was ever written down. It was the whispered phrase survivors passed along in half-finished stories. A method to erase anyone who stumbled too close to the truth. As I sprinted through neon-lit streets, my pulse hammering louder than the sirens in the distance, one memory burned brightest in my mind. A transmission buried deep in the leak, a pilot's dying voice, choked with static, * they aren't here to talk. They're hunting colonies. *. And now, they were hunting me. The contact came just when I thought I'd lost everything. I'd been running for days, sleeping in subway tunnels, stealing scraps of food, keeping my devices dark. Every shadow felt like a threat, every unfamiliar face another set of eyes watching me. Then the message arrived, no address, no traceable source. Just my name, typed into the screen of a public terminal I thought was disconnected, * it's already begun. I froze. Whoever sent it wasn't guessing. They knew who I was, where I was, and what I carried. I almost walked away right then, but the next line appeared before I could, * check your drive. New file. I plugged the hard drive into the terminal with trembling hands. A folder blinked into existence, coordinates lined up in neat rows. They weren't random. They were colonies, our colonies, the fragile outpost humanity had carved into hostile soil and thin air across distant moons. Alongside the numbers were video fragments, warships cutting across the void, settlements burning, civilians running beneath skies lit with alien fire. The pattern was clear: strike, erase, vanish. No demands, no ultimatums. Just annihilation. But what twisted the knife wasn't the brutality, it was the compliance. In one recording, Grainy but undeniable, human diplomats sat at a polished table across from shadowy figures wreathed in static interference. Their voices were calm, deliberate. Asterisk, the outer rim may be surrendered. Sacrifices must be made to protect the core. Asterisk. I wanted to smash the terminal, to scream, to deny what I was hearing. But the truth was undeniable. Humanity's leaders weren't defending us. They were feeding us to the wolves, sacrificing colonies to buy themselves time. Anonymous had chosen me for a reason. Not because I was special, because I was reckless enough to burn the whole secret world down. Leaving Earth was never part of the plan, but staying meant certain death. With the help of forged clearance codes buried inside the leak, I bribed my way onto a rusting cargo vessel bound for the outer rim. The ship stank of oil and recycled air, its hull groaning like an old man with every burn of the engines. But I didn't care. I needed to see the truth with my own eyes. When we dropped out of slipspace, I thought at first the coordinates were wrong. The colony below wasn't a settlement, it was a graveyard. Where there should have been domes and greenhouses and families building a life, there was only scorched earth. The soil had fused into glass, and the sky shimmered with radiation. Entire cities reduced to ash. But then, movement. A signal from beneath the ruins. I followed it into the wasteland, stumbling through the heat haze until I found the entrance to a tunnel system. Inside, survivors huddled in darkness. Men, women, children, eyes wide with fear, clothes torn, voices hollow. They weren't just hiding from starvation. They were hiding from something worse. One of them, an old miner with hands like stone, told me what happened. The ships came without warning, black shapes blotting out the stars. They didn't announce themselves, didn't demand surrender. They descended like predators, tearing through defenses, dragging people into the night. Some they killed outright. Others they hunted for sport. They aren't soldiers, the old man rasped. They're hunters. And we're prey. That's when the truth sank in deeper than ever before. The aliens didn't come to conquer. They came to stalk us across the stars, to test themselves against humanity as though we were nothing more than game animals. And Earth had known all along. One of the survivors pressed a small recorder into my hands, its casing cracked and scorched from fire. She was trembling as she gave it to me, her eyes wet, her voice breaking. My husband, he was military. He stayed behind when the first wave came. He told me to run. This is all I have left. I thumbed the switch, and a man's voice filled the tunnel, ragged with pain, heavy with finality. Static chewed at the edges of his words, but the message was clear. Asterisk, if you're hearing this, fight. Don't run. Don't beg. Don't give them the satisfaction. We are not prey. We are the hunters who learned to fight back. Asterisk. The recording ended in a burst of screams and weapons fire. My throat tightened, and I shut my eyes against the weight of it. It wasn't just a farewell, it was a command. A call to arms buried in blood and ashes. I looked around at the survivors. Their faces were hollowed out by fear, but behind their eyes was something else, something waiting to ignite. That soldier hadn't just died for his wife or his people. He died believing that humanity could still stand up, even in the face of monsters who saw us as nothing more than trophies. It was then I understood why the anonymous leak had come to me. It wasn't chance. It wasn't luck. I was a carrier, a fuse waiting to burn. The truth was never meant to sit on one hard drive, hidden away. It had to spread, faster than the hunters could kill, louder than the governments could silence. So I did it. I began transmitting pieces of the files through every backdoor I could find, pirate satellites, black market networks, hidden nodes. The truth would not die in these tunnels. But in doing so, I knew I had just painted the brightest target imaginable on my back. The sky changed before the world even understood what was happening. One night, people looked up and saw stars vanish behind shadows too large, too deliberate, too unnatural. At first, governments tried to frame it as atmospheric phenomena, sensor malfunctions, orbital debris. But you can't disguise a fleet when it stretches across the heavens like a wall of steel and scales. The aliens had stopped hiding. They wanted us to see them now. Cities across Earth reported the same sight, enormous ships drifting silently, blotting out the moon, their hulls shimmering with patterns like reptilian skin. They weren't cloaked anymore, they were daring us to notice. Daring us to react. The broadcasts were instant. News anchors stammered, trying to read off government-approved scripts. Officials urged calm, repeating the same rehearsed lines, "There is no threat. Remain in your homes. The situation is under control." But the world had already seen the files. I had made sure of that. Propaganda meant nothing now. For the first time in centuries, humanity's anger outweighed its fear. Protests filled the streets. Entire colonies, once silenced, rose up in defiance. The old whispers began to spread again, not of surrender, but of resistance. And then, something happened that none of us expected. Old fleets, warships mothballed after decades of disuse, suddenly roared back to life. Shipyards thought abandoned lit up with fire and industry. Submerged hangars beneath Earth's oceans began to rise, water streaming from the hulls of war machines designed for a war humanity was never supposed to fight. The message spread like wildfire through the networks, through the colonies, through every survivor who had lost someone. Asterisk if they want the hunters, they'll get the hunters. Asterisk. For the first time since opening that cursed file, I felt it, humanity's pulse, steady and unbroken, ready to strike. I speak these words not as a reporter, not as a whistleblower, but as a witness to what happens when humanity refuses to be prey. The leak revealed the truth, yes, but truth alone doesn't save lives. Action does. And action, we took in waves, across every colony, every hidden stronghold, every city that had once cowered beneath shadows we couldn't even name. Our ships rose from hidden docks, black against the void, engines roaring with the promise of retribution. We were no longer running, no longer hiding. The aliens had assumed we were weak, fragile, predictable. They had counted on fear to paralyze us. They had underestimated what humans can endure, and what humans can unleash when cornered. We became hunters in our own right. Fleets that had once been museum pieces now cut through space like blades. Fighters, modified by desperate engineers and stubborn pilots, struck at the alien armadas with precision that shocked even us. Every colony that survived became a fortress. Every human who had hidden, who had mourned, now trained, now armed, now ready. And in the quiet moments before battle, I could hear it in the comms, in the voices of those who had lost everything yet refused to bow: pride, rage, determination. We were more than survivors. We were predators reborn, heirs to a legacy of persistence that no predator, no alien, could ever break. They thought they chose the battleground. They thought the hunt was theirs to command. But they had forgotten one essential truth: humans are not prey. We never were. So, to the stars, to the fleets that dared test us, I send this warning through every channel, every satellite, every hidden transmitter. You wanted the truth? Here it is. Humanity doesn't run. Humanity doesn't plead. Humanity hunts. And when the first strike lands, the universe will learn what we already knew deep in our bones. We are unstoppable. We are unyielding. We are humanity.